Hello, everyone, and thanks for attending. Today, we are going to be having a panel discussion on research and design operations infrastructure. And joining me today for the discussion is John Calhoun, Senior Director of Design Ops at Salesforce and author of The Design Conductors. As well, we have Leah Hogan, Principal for Experience Research at User Testing. And then we have Jocelyn Lin, Product Design Manager at Airtable. Sean McKay of Whole Product Thinking. We also have Luke Murphy, Head of Marketing at Zero Height. And Nick Russell, a co-founder of Duolo and co-author of Insight-Led Growth. I'm sorry, Unlocking Insight-Led Growth. So we have roughly 60 minutes here, and we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for panelists to answer any of the attendee questions, which if you have any, please drop them in the Q&A section of the panel. And I want to just take a brief minute to let folks down the line, so starting with John, just briefly introduce yourself and then share with us your experience and perspective on current design operations infrastructure.
Sure. Thanks, John, for hosting us. My name is John Calhoun. I'm a Senior Director of Design Ops at Salesforce, and I'm also the co-author of The Design Conductors, which is the first book dedicated to design operations written by us and for us. I would say briefly, my view of the state of the infrastructure is that it is challenged by budget at the moment, and also very siloed. So when I think about design operations infrastructure, I'm thinking about how can we do more with less dollars, which means finding the right tools is very important. Integrations between those tools, and how do those tools help us bust down silos and not just keep the great insights and data from our research and design organizations in separate buckets.
Excellent. Leah, how about you?
So I'm here at User Testing, and obviously, as one of the primary vendors in this space, I think the perspective that I bring very much echoes with the points that Calhoun brought up, which were really around the fact that people are satisficing with ruthless efficiency the dollars that they have to spend on infrastructure. And I think that also means that people are making strategic choices about what research to do when, what work to do when, and how to prioritize and provide the right guardrails to ensure that the right people are doing the right thing at the right time.
Excellent. Jocelyn, how about you?
Hello, my name is Jocelyn, and I am a design manager at Airtable. And so not only do I get to think about how design teams work with our other collaborators, I also get to think about how other companies want their design teams to work with collaborators and help them build the tools that enable them to do so. Nice to meet you all.
Excellent. Sean.
Yeah, hello everyone. So Sean McKay, I have been UX design in the field for about over 30 years now. With that, I've had a whole journey of building a Handrail, which is a user research platform that eventually got me to user testing, where I was there for a couple of years as well. So I've done everything from the enterprise and building workflow-based tools to now I'm back to consulting and doing whole product thinking, which is around how to bring a framework together of what and why we need to do different aspects, which operations is a big part to making sure that does it well at scale. And then currently I'm actually just flipped back into a startup. So now I'm back into an early startup that is, now I'm the designer and but working with the developers, we're already creating our design ops to make sure we're efficient even at the smallest scale. So including research. So I'm kind of gone the whole gamut from both perspectives. So.
Excellent. Luke?
Hello, I'm Luke. Pronouns are they, them. I am currently heading up the marketing department over at Zero Height and advocacy departments, having started as a design advocate. But my background's actually in design leadership. And I suppose for me, echoing what Leah and John were saying around the space at the moment, I do think that we're at a point where, I don't know, I feel like design ops, design systems, everything that goes with it has kind of reached that over the peak of inflated expectations. And now we're at a point where everybody's asking for some actual justifiable value to be shown in everything we're doing. And therefore all the purse strings are tightening, and we're having to figure out how to actually sell that in. And I think it's one of the big challenges we're focusing at the moment.
Right. And last but not least, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, John. So, hi, everyone. I'm Nick Russell. I'm one of the co-founders of Joulo. We help organizations to break down knowledge silos and unlock sustainable insight-led growth. And we do that by building for teams an AI-powered knowledge repository, which you can launch to your whole organization in just a matter of days. My point of view on the design ops tools and infrastructure landscape at the moment is I'm a big fan of what having to work remotely did to teams when it comes to working online in real time, enabling a much more collaborative approach to design and research. But teams still very much feel scattered, confused, and are lacking that true synergy, that sort of 1 + 1 = 3 across the organization. So yes, the tools might be integrated, but the teams and departments typically aren't. And so creating a joined up view and scaling design, research, and impact across the organization is where the real challenge comes. And I echo the points of everyone that's just spoken around how you manage to do that in a way that articulates impact and ROI for the people that you're looking to achieve buy-in from across the organization to make that change happen. So I'm really looking forward to joining the conversation from that perspective today. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. And thanks for giving your time to this panel. I want to see if we can get into the meat of things really quickly. I just wanted to point out, and John mentioned it in his intro, but there's a lot of groundwork that still needs to happen in not just setting up and getting the right tools in place for your team to have end-to-end research, design, and validation, all the things that are continuously integrated into your organization, not just for digital products and services, but also how do you vertically integrate that to the organization so you're actually leading strategically with your insights and things that can drive strategic business innovation, as well as design excellence and quality control on the products and services you're deploying to the public. So in there are a lot of different discipline-specific tooling that design ops managers are setting up. And then for end-to-end workflow to happen, from continuous discovery to continuous design and all the other things, where we integrate with our counterparts across the spectrum of digital design and experience management, as well as how that's laddering up to our organizational goals. There's a lot of work that design ops managers do to thread the communication, the information management, and the process management in that journey. So I'd like to hear just a little bit, John and Sean, I think the two of you have had sort of the biggest breadth of experience looking at these things and trying to cobble together things. So when it comes to custom integrations and automations and things like that, what do you feel most challenged by in your infrastructure? And we'll start with John, I guess.
What do I feel most challenged by our current infrastructure? I had mentioned silos, and I think that's the biggest challenge that we face. One of the advantages of being budget constrained as we kind of head into New Year's is we are reducing the number of tools, which means we're reducing the number of places where the good things live. And that's a positive, right? But they still live in separate areas. And so knowing that our research insights can live on user testing, they can live on our internal Confluence site, they can live as a recording in Google Drive, still continues to stymie us, because how do you get a bird's eye view of what we should be doing next, when every time you ask that question, it requires going to 3 different places. And that's just user research. That's not even talking about the end-to-end business decision making of what should we prioritize in our upcoming releases to make our end user experience better. So that's the biggest challenge. I would say 2 ways that I would approach solving it is, 1, acknowledge that tools are always going to create friction and will put up some degree of firewalls between them, and put the people at the center of it. So having good experienced design or research ops managers who are thinking about this problem and dedicated to extracting and knocking down those walls should be your first course of action. Don't necessarily think that a workflow or a script is going to solve it when you have human beings who can execute astronomically faster. But 2, do think about workflows and scripts. Do think about AI. Do think about how you might feed your entire infrastructure into a small or large language model, and start to think about how you can use tools where I'll talk about Slack. Salesforce is very Slack forward. We use Slack to actually stitch together our horizontal experience. Like, we are very invested in only communicating in Slack. And when you have a single place where all the conversation is happening and where all the knowledge is flowing, Slack is very powerful with allowing you to connect the dots between groups. And there are workflows that allow you to do things like recognize when a new file has been shared and alert the right stakeholders, to summarize the thread of a long conversation between 2 designers so that you can put it into an executive summary for your VP. So human beings, I want to wrap up. Human beings is my first recommendation. Recommendation number 2 is think about how you can use workflow scripts and now AI, especially if you're Slack forward, to start to stitch together that experience of making the experience.
Excellent. And Sean, I know some of the challenges you were trying to take on with Handrail, and then also, as VP over at user testing, looking at not just what are the things that were discipline specific you're trying to solve for researchers, but then how do we communicate and connect them into the other aspects of their organization? I just thought maybe you'd have some things you might want to share with the team.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, when we think about, I guess I'm going to go a little bit up meta on this of the thinking between operations. And so you have the, design ops, research ops, product ops, all these ops, and they all should be under a whole that is the whole company is moving forward in the direction it needs to be going. And so it starts to look at, right now they are siloed, how they're thought about. And one part of that is deployment. How do we also not only deploy, get the feedback of what's been deployed, both literally in like analytics and different feedback loops, as well as research and qualitative and evaluative. So I think there's a lot in just this whole backbone and thread that when you're looking at it, it's like what decisions are most important to the business right now? And are we set up to get that feedback? So if everything's getting constrained and you got to cut down on tools, all right, what's the most critical path that you have to be doing in the business as a whole? And I think sometimes it starts to be cherry picking different tools or to get rid of them, and not more holistically looking at that as you create that strategy.
Yeah. I think that might set us up nicely. So both of you, John and Sean, shared from more the design ops practitioner and then the lens of like, what are you trying to do from an ops perspective and at the stakeholder side of the infrastructure. We also have Leah, Jocelyn, Nick, and Luke here, who represent both discipline-specific tooling to support parts of the organization, as well as, and I want to highlight Airtable's incredible flexibility in not just supporting a single discipline, but actually stratifying across an organization, not just on delivery side and planning and management, but all the different ways we kind of thread information together to make sense of it all. So having heard John and Sean there just momentarily, want Leah for you to start and then pass to, you can popcorn to either Nick, Jocelyn, or Luke. From the vendor's perspective of providing tools to people who are trying to set up these cohesive experiences for their teams. Just talk a little bit about, what your team's perspective on this is, or how you're leaning into that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, practically from a product perspective at user testing, a lot of the focus going into 2025 has been one, how do we really first reconnect with what it is that people are doing now? And I say that because one of the trends that I'm seeing out there is we're seeing more UX generalists who may not necessarily be spending all of their time in a single tool anymore, but actually spreading their time across different disciplines and really trying to deliver, again, a lot more insights and actually deliverables with a lot less when it comes to like resources and time. And so I think a couple of the ways that I'm seeing both user testing, but other platforms out there are really to try to support as many methodologies, different levels of skill, knowledge, training, awareness, with an eye towards providing just enough guidance and information and access to data that, and this is obviously difficult to do. I'm not saying this is easy, right? But just
Threading
enough,
the needle.
Right, it is, because not all companies want everybody to have access to everything. Like sometimes, for very good reasons, companies have decided that they're going to implement silos and it's just going to stay that way. And so I think we're using LLMs, artificial intelligence, to help to speed up some of the processes. So you're seeing that in some of the reporting and some of the things that we're doing to improve some of the pre-digesting of data so that when you're showing it, and obviously it helps people who are less experienced as researchers, but it also helps people who have less time who are experienced researchers. And then the other thing is really trying to help to bring those insights together across, what would have been different tools in the past. So I think one of the things we're doing at user testing is essentially integrating some strategies around like providing access to insights across studies, more reporting, more, again, analysis inside of user testing that didn't exist in the past. And I'll popcorn it over to Lynn. Yeah.
Well, 1 second before we go to Luke.
Yeah.
So that's actually one of the things that I hear the most when it comes to research operations is how do we support the culture of consumption at like the right information at the right point in time when it's most needed. And yeah, sometimes that is like being able to build that network of what are the right insight nodes and who needs that and when, from a systems perspective, to be able to support the culture of consumption that's necessary. So it's great to hear that you're leaning into that and looking to support that in many ways. Luke, how about Zero Height?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we're obviously more on the design system side of things. And it's a similar kind of thing that we're hearing, and especially with what John was saying around, it was really interesting to hear John say around Slack being like the main tool. I do feel like that there was a tendency for a lot of B2B SaaS companies to try and build their own little walled gardens of products, where it was essential that you came into there and you used everything in there. And when they built things out, it was always within that little walled garden. And it was something that we sort of noticed very early on that there was this real desire for folks to actually have similar to what Leah was saying around the information needs to be served up at the right time in the right context to the people who need it. And none of the products we were building kind of supported this. And I do feel like that this is, where I know it's definitely something that, we're moving towards, but it is something that I feel like, the industry, especially around like design ops and design systems, is going towards, in terms of, it's almost like a platformication of the, of the tooling to basically make it so that the consumption of what you're trying to build up there, whether it's documentation or insights or whatever it is actually delivered to people where they need it. And it's especially something that we found when we were very much rooted in the vertical of like design, which is a bit of a problem with design systems because design systems isn't just about designers. Problem was, anybody outside of design was like, I don't want to go to a zero height site or a doc site to get this information. I want it to come to me. And so like that was something that we had to, reckon with for quite a while of like, oh, we need to fundamentally change the way our product works to make this happen. And I don't know, I do think that this is the way that it should be as well. And with things like LLMs, it's kind of becoming even more essential because, it's that sort of almost like transformation, basically giving the users the data or giving the users the data in a way that can be transformed and consumed in the right ways, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that tees up Nick nicely because of what Duolo has been up to, just with respect to leveraging AIs and LLMs and looking for pathways of information. I'd love to give you a moment to speak about your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we've found at Duolo is that there's this really interesting way of using insights to transcend the org chart. So the conversation started by talking here about people and the democratization of research across different roles, this sort of discovery piece that plays out in various forms across the company. That might be right from your user researchers, but also it might be to your market insights team or your sales team or anyone that's sort of on the front line customer facing. And so I think there's this world that we live in now where there's this autonomy that's fueled by specialized tooling to help people gather insights and share those across their team and with stakeholders. But where things get difficult is that joined up view. And so actually, before we talk about tools and tooling, we always talk with people we're speaking with about having the right foundations in place to enable this ability to use the knowledge that you already have to bring the company, bring teams, departments, and disciplines together more effectively. And that really starts by this, mindset, this product mindset, if you like, of think big, start small. And if you're able to bring together a few really key strategic insights, those type of insights that just have driven for one team or department a load of impact previously, but might also be helpful to another area of the business. If you're able to use a definition for that type of strategic insight and a template to start showing to other teams things that might be useful to them, that starts to put you in a really good place to open up more of these sort of collaborative joined up conversations that help to unlock more value for the customers and the business. And so we get teams to think about the definitions, the template side of things before considering what type of tooling to use, because you can build some of this stuff in house. You can also invest in dedicated tooling. There's all types of ways in which you can approach that. But to build on what Luke was just talking about there as well, in terms of playing where people are playing or working where people are already working, what John brought to the table initially as well is moving from, as an industry, a pull everyone to my tool type play to actually let's push this information, these insights out to where people are working today so that they get the right insights at the right time to make the right decisions. And so our vision for Duolo is actually to deliver much more of a medium style experience where people will wake up to their morning coffee and they will just get delivered in their inbox or their Slack channel or wherever they've indicated that's where they go to gain their insight when they're decision making, and get the latest stories, the latest insights around the topics that they are interested in today. And so that's what we're moving towards, in line with what Zero Height and some of the others are doing here. So that's my point of view on this, is let's move the industry from a pull to a push, and let's work together collaboratively across vendors to enable a more streamlined view on that.
Love it. And I think you said something that tees up Jocelyn really nicely there. It's like, before you get started, you need to have a shared perception on like what are the taxonomies, how are we laying the right foundation for information to be meaningful and shared in meaningful ways at the organization. And Airtable being one of the most flexible data management tools I've ever used. I'm sure you've seen your fair share of how organizations need to do this work, but we'd love to just hear a little bit from you and what you've been seeing at Airtable.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely every function, design ops is a function that works with many different functions, right? And you're going to be working with engineers, you're going to be working with salespeople, and you're not going to be able to get engineers out of Jira. They're going to stay in Jira, and you're going to have to work with how they manage their projects in Jira, and so on and so forth with everybody else. And so at Airtable, what we've seen is, design ops team realize that they're at a point where they need visibility, they need to consolidate, and they need to be able to, at a view, be able to see what everybody's up to and have that ladder up to organizational goals, organizational projects, so that different functions can collaborate together. And so you can connect to these different systems where each function wants to work and which each function best does their work, but bring it together both in the data itself and how you model that data coming in, whether it's insights, whether it's your customer data, whether it's your project status, right? Model that, bring it into Airtable, and then you can also create a very custom process by which you spread best practices about how projects should move through milestones, which customers are priorities, what insights are you seeing coming from these customers that then result in a product that you're pushing out, and the ROI on that. Like, it's super flexible. You can do all of that. You can even bring in AI and do best practices around how you want people to make their work more effective in that way. And so that's what we're seeing, is that people come to Airtable and say, hey, we have a problem. We can maybe consolidate some of these, right? There's tool consolidation going on. And some of these processes can be brought into Airtable, and some of these can't, and that's fine. People are going to keep working in Gong, in Salesforce, in Jira. And how do we work together and make sure that everybody's on the same page so that they can make good decisions?
Yeah. I mean, if I think of my team's evolution in our relationship with Airtable, it started off very sort of, let's just get exploratory and what are the possible ways we can bring information together, structure it, organize it, build workflow. And it's moved towards a much more opinionated position on, these are the tables, these are the information taxonomies and structures and workflows that we have. And I feel like Airtable itself has taken that maturity arc. I just saw recently the product operations, I don't know, feature set
Product Central
release.
Yep.
Yes. And so taking a really opinionated stab at like, this is an operating model. These are the information hierarchies that we need to implement. I just, if you want to talk a little bit about that, or if there's anything you can share. The thinking behind.
For sure, there's some pretty common use cases people come to Airtable for example, project management, product operations, design operations, research operations. And while each business has its own very specific needs, and that's where Airtable flexibility comes in play, right? They all share some like very common ways of doing work. And so why not save people time in setting that up for themselves by giving them like kind of a little bit out of the box, but fully customizable, an opinion on how we've seen other people do this work and how we can kind of give you a head start. And so that's kind of the approach there, that yes, we have ways for you to get started much more quickly. You don't have to build it from scratch. But if you want to, and probably you will need to, because everybody has their own thoughts on how their business best runs, you can go ahead and customize, build on top of it, and just really adapt it and make it really powerful for what you need to do.
Yeah. I mean, I use the term opinionated or unopinionated, and like in the early days of design operations, we kind of ran without a definition, right? So what was the remit? What are the things that we're sort of putting together to make sure that operational excellence is at hand? And now that the book, The Design Conductors, has come out, we actually have a definition that's pretty concrete and I think covers a lot of ground. John, having had some time now, like hearing from some of the vendors and thinking about the tooling that's available, and there's such a breadth, right, from discovery tools all the way to design implementation and insight management, and then the connective tissue between it all. Just do you have thoughts on the tools that are in play? Any opportunities that you think are out there for road mapping, better stability for how end-to-end could be constructed?
Well, at Salesforce, we use many of the tools that are being represented here today. We are big fans of Zero Height and user testing and Airtable. And what I would say is, these tools help us refine and craft a better what, right? Like what are our milestones? What are the user insights? What are the specs for a component? And when I think about how design operations can help build a better user experience or a better product, what I need these tools to do is move from what to when and why. When do our stakeholders need to see these artifacts, and why do they need to see these artifacts? Right? We've kind of danced around the topic of integration and surfacing insights into places where people are already working. But I would argue that like even our most senior stakeholders don't always understand when they need to take action and why they need to take action on these particular artifacts. So like, what are the user testing insights telling me? They're telling me a lot, but when do I need to take action on them? Probably in the pre-planning of a release cycle, right? Don't do it when you're trying to turn an epic into a story. That's too late, right? So when do these insights from user testing become valuable? Why do I need to use this tool? It's because they've already synthesized it for us. It's because you can go to a video, you can see the prototype in action. Same thing with, say, Zero Height. When does an engineer need to understand Zero Height? Is it when the design specs are being handed over from Figma? No, they need to be familiar and have been brought into the Zero Height ecosystem well before, so that they can understand the full scope of the component library, so that they can understand when customize versus override, right? So that when they are now handed the designs, they have the understanding of the context. And why do they use Zero Height? It's because, you can do drill downs. You can see what the different states look like, right? So we kind of need to help, these tools need to help educate our stakeholders on like when they should be taking action. And to Nick's point, like being proactive and serving up those notifications and making our stakeholders aware is super important. But also understanding when that should happen and helping educate the why, I think will really make our end-to-end experience. Because I think the designers get it, right? We're just too busy to communicate all. So like, how fantastic would it be if the tools could do that communication for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about Zero Height, which serves the very great function of, communicating the design patterns, from the designers, the product managers to the engineers. But there's a great many things that don't go into a design system, like all of your prototypes, which might, live somewhere else to be tested in user testing. But those screens have to be accounted for. Those interactive workflows need to be accounted for in ways that they're not in a design system. So all of these things do need to have somewhere to connect so that we can do the right level of testing, the right level of validation, the right design planning and orchestration. So yeah, brings up a great point. Sean, I'd also just like to hear from you, just your perspective on having heard from some of these tools and opportunities for innovation.
Yeah, I think, when I started working on this whole product framework that I'll be actually publishing a little bit more out on. I went into consulting, I worked on this framework, talked about it a bit, and then got sucked into the startup world and kind of now I'm surfacing again. So, but part of that was, the reason I made it into a visual map was, and how these different disciplines interconnect and what are we doing and what are we not doing very well, and having real honest conversations about that. So that when you're making decisions in a small company like right now, or in a large company, an enterprise, if it's tool consolidation and something's now going to be more challenging because of that, then have that explicit conversation. Like this, because we're now going to cut out this tool, means humans are going to need to do this part. And that's okay. And we need to focus in this way. but to the business, this is the business impact that's going to create. And just, I think there's so much that becomes more about like convincing versus educating, pulling up, pointing at something and saying, this impacts that, keeping it simple. And that means if we eliminate it, we're going to have more distributed, it's going to be harder to manage. We're going to need more humans doing that. And so I guess I'm just, again, zooming out, I think the more you can do that to set expectation. I'm currently doing that as like a 5-person startup of like, why are we building a design system? Why are we doing this? And why are we doing that? Why are we spending? Because we got to go slow to go fast. We got to put up the infrastructure so that we can actually move quickly. I have to do the same justification. So that's my advice, is to make sure you're always zooming out, getting people aligned on what and why you need to do these things, what's happening, why do we need to do it, and then have the conversations based on that understanding. And it's true with tooling, like what needs to connect.
For sure. I mean, I think about the whole product thinking map, and I'm not sure how many of the audience have seen it, and I'd love to see it in its entirety. But when I do think about it, you weren't just connecting the dots between what's in discovery, what's in product solutioning. It was also what is being learned in the market as we put it out there, and then what does that mean to the organization as a whole? And there isn't a lot of systems infrastructure to monitor and manage and connect those dots. So it is a lot of human activity at the moment. And I just love to see a future where if we're doing stuff intentionally, either on the insight side or the design management side, and we're looking to where that's impacting at the organization at large, that some level of infrastructure was there to support us with those connections. We're not just dropping threads and interjecting our human error into the whole scenario where we lose the plot, right? But yeah, let's shift back to our product vendors. Nick, it sounded like what Dulo was doing had some AI leanings, and how you're sort of rising above the org chart, and I'd like to hear a little more about that also.
Yeah, sure. So this conversation that's just happened here is really interesting around, how people develop that awareness of the goals, the strategic direction of the company they're working within, and then how to angle the work that they're doing to make sure that there's alignment there, and that threads through from discovery through to delivery, but also that wider stuff that you're talking about there in terms of Sean's framework and how market insights and all of that comes together. And I think what we're really excited about at Julo is that I think from the many years of running this business, we found that speaking with researchers, designers, product people, there's a real mix in terms of the confidence around understanding top level business metrics, your sort of pirate metric level metrics, and how the work that you're doing at a more tactical level ladders up to those metrics. And there's a lot of confusion, anxiety around how to really thread those worlds together so that you're truly building stuff for the customer that really makes an impact for the business. And actually, a lot of teams, a lot of people are doing all this work already. It's just there's a gap there in how to let's take an example, like how the work I'm doing on the registration flow within my app actually ladders up to the activation side of things when it comes to the goals at the business level, and how that impacts revenue at the top level. And so when we were building Julo, we looked at how we could augment the knowledge repository with AI. We integrated with OpenAI to start with, and we started looking at what questions can we ask to this LLM around the knowledge that people are centralizing in their repositories. And actually, we started out with very fundamental level, what do I know around X, Y, and Z? What research have we done around X, Y, and Z before? And that started returning some answers, and we got quite excited about that. But the real shift happened about midway through this year, where we started then asking more strategic questions. How might we improve retention for our German market based on what we've done in the US, as an example, and seeing the AI, the Q&A experience return to researchers and designers, some things that they could think about with the temperature setting to 0, so it's not hallucinating, it's pointing you to real source in context and all the information that's been used to arrive at this. But being able to use that to actually start to have more of those strategic conversations and understand better about how to thread your work to those top level metrics. And that's what we're really excited about, is actually being able to use this technology to increase the confidence around people realizing they're already doing this stuff, but finding the right way to articulate it and share that to basically increase impact, increase how people are showcasing ROI, and increase the investment or the reinvestment in the further tooling, solutions, services that they can use to further level up. That's the really exciting bit about this LLM AI side of it for me.
Totally. Leah, how about since we're in the research discovery thread and what that's doing for the organizations? How about you?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because I think some of the points that I'm hearing across what people are speaking about are really around the fact that when it's not going right, when the infrastructure is not supporting the right or the tools or the platforms or even the processes that you have in place. And I think that some of what I'm seeing is that go fast to go slow is really all about saying, we've done it wrong until now. It feels bad. How can we get this to work better going forward? And so I'm seeing a lot of social engineering kind of happening where people are taking that step back and saying, it feels bad. We're spending too much time spinning wheels and rehashing the same arguments. And sometimes just like spending that time in looking across what it is that and all the things that are going wrong. What can we do to set ourselves on the right path? And I think some of it is, how I started this conversation saying like people are getting ruthlessly efficient. They're saying,
yeah,
we're going to put a stop to kind of like these old arguments that we're having and get very disciplined about just focusing on these things right now and then increasing scope and then really ruling in, being very disciplined about ruling in what guardrails are going to put up for what folks, right? And I say that mostly because, one of the biggest challenges I see is quality in the research that people are doing and our ability to scale what is a skill across people who it takes time to develop that ability, right? It's truly a skill. And so, some of it, yes, you can semi-automate, but you still need a person there who can tell the difference between that hallucination and what's real.
Absolutely. And Luke, I'm sure Zero Height's been looking at what AI can do either from the gen side or the predictive sort of analytics side. What's going on in the future over there?
Yeah, I mean, it's an area that we've dipped our toe into. To be honest, actually, I'd be interested to hear what people in the audience think about this. And actually, John and Sean, if you've had similar experiences, we dipped our toe into the world of AI last year by doing, to be honest, a pretty crap implementation of, you could do a prompt and it would return you some documentation. And it was because we'd been asked for it. And lo and behold, nobody used it. And also, we had so many complaints from customers about the fact that we were integrating with AI services, and could we please not share their data with the AI services? Which I think to me just says something about there's, I was talking about the hype cycle earlier. Like AI is still very much at the start of that hype journey. And I think that everybody's really excited about the concept of AI and still really reticent to actually use it in any kind of like business critical context, which personally I think is a bit short-sighted because I do think that there's some real power in there. So one of the things that we've actually been doing recently is, instead of going down the AI route, that I mentioned it before around like opening the data up so that folks can do it themselves, so that we don't have to sort of like go down that route. We've been building a lot of stuff internally, like little tools for ourselves. So building like RAG apps. In fact, if it was one thing that I was going to say for people to like look into on the DesignOps side, is like how to build a simple RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation app, which is basically just putting your knowledge sort of before the LLM and being able to, you know, query it and transform it in a way that is actually useful to you. Because, you know, when it comes down to it, the best use of AI is usually going to be a very specific targeted case. Will we do something with AI in the future? Probably. But at the moment, we're kind of sitting back and going, you know what, we're just going to provide the platform for you to be able to sort of transform and use this data. And we'll sort of see how it washes out a little bit more, because at the moment, you know, very few organizations are actually happy with us, you know, using their data and or opening up their data to those LLMs.
Sure. One second. I'm not sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, we are on the like sort of at the leading edge of where AI is taking us, and I think there's still a lot of discovery in there. But Jocelyn, I know that Airtable's also been pushing into, you know, from a functional standpoint, like features that folks can use with their data sets within Airtable, and various ways that AI is sort of making its presence to help drive, you know, utility. And I'd love to hear some of your perspective on it.
Yeah, well, like Luke said, we're still figuring out what can be done with AI, I think across the whole industry, right? And two really interesting applications that we're looking at Airtable is one, how do we help you build these processes and workflows in a much more like easy, less onerous way? It's hard to sit down and think, okay, I need to model the data. Okay, I need to build these structures. Okay, I need to build these actions and then hook it all together. And so where can AI come in to make that just easier for you? The other part of what we're thinking about AI is, okay, you have these workflows that you're building, you have these tool sets that you're putting together. Where can AI come in and help you make your life easier in, you know, doing things that used to be really manual before? That seems to be a really effective application of AI. Or things where it brings together multiple sources of information that was really hard to get to and leads you to insights that you couldn't easily draw before without a lot of work. And so we're providing people like you, like the audience here, who's really interested in, you know, creating the tool sets and creating ways for their teams to work more effectively together. Like, how can they use AI to make their lives easier, make their teams work together better? And so we're looking at both of these angles pretty seriously. And I think there's a lot of really interesting applications for where we're going. And yeah, stay tuned, and you'll be seeing more of that in Airtable.
Awesome. I just wanted to, before we move over to audience Q&A, it seemed like there's a couple of things we touched on. So one was, you know, like make sure you have the right people in place as you're talking about end-to-end processes. So infrastructure isn't just systems and tooling. It's also like, what's your culture that you're building around managing the excellence, right? That's one. But two, when it does come to like, how are these disparate tools that are being, you know, created to serve discipline-specific functional areas within your organization, what might be the platform thinking that we have as we are either laddering across to the other disciplines that we're serving, or laddering up to the organizational needs from a, you know, strategic insight and design direction management perspective, and like, what is it costing us to learn this and to respond with this, and what's the impact that's having, needs some form of a framework that is, one, supporting the communication across, but also up and down. So as people who are providing solutions to that space, and also those who are in there in the mix, threading through their custom integrations and automations, be thoughtful about what are we doing to connect our disciplines across the end-to-end spectrum, and making sure that that feels like a continuous loop where there is a shared destiny for all of our researchers and designers and leaders in the org. And then how do we mature that? How do we stabilize it? Are there things that we can share as people who are building these tools and frameworks and solutions for organizations to collectively mature towards? Is there conversations like this one that we can have a lot more of? And what's the right forum for that? And how do we sort of usher in this new discipline, especially as we throw AI into the mix? So with that, really do want to thank you all. And I have some questions here from our attendees. Any tips on how to sell an international design ops role to a consultancy management? Okay, so I guess this is about framing design operations as a consultancy. Anyone have tips around that?
I absolutely have thoughts about it. And it really, to me, is this work is happening even if you don't have a person who is nominally responsible for it. So you have a choice. You can either have it done really well by somebody whose job it is to figure this out and has dedicated time, skill, expertise. Or you can have it done less effectively, less efficiently, and intentionally by a bunch of people whose job it is not to do it. And I think, I see when I see organizations that have essentially done a time study to say how much time is this taking from how many people to do it, and done a cost benefit analysis of how much expensive time is it taking from our senior researchers or research managers, or designers, right? Or senior designers, because it's usually the leaders who end up with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then let's carve out this space and just embrace the fact that we need to invest in this in order to get people spending their time in the right way.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I heard as a keynote in 2019 when I first got into design operations was that design ops is the tragedy of the commons, or the North Pacific gyre of things that nobody in the org wants to do, right? And rightfully, it's been picked up by people who saw the gaps and started to fill them, and then it matured into, well, this is actually a practice that doesn't exist that should. So I think you're right. I mean, there's the consulting side of it, but I think I've had conversations with Nick in the past. What Dulo is doing is not just providing the tool, but they also provide a level of onboarding and consultation. I believe each of you as tool providers have this sort of consultative approach where you're leading with best practice and here's how we do it. And I'm just wondering if in there you're thinking of the operating models and how can we do that? And just extending on our Q&A contribution here, does anyone have sort of thoughts on that consulting angle, but also as a vendor coming in to consult?
Yeah,
Luke.
I can kickstart. Oh, yeah, go on, Luke, after you.
I was going to say, please jump in because I'm still pulling my thoughts together on that one.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So our point of view on this is that, when it comes to doing operations well, it's a combination of tooling, people, and process, right? So it's a change management piece. And actually, without realizing, everyone that's trying to drive a new initiative within their company is doing some form of change management. And so with that comes finding the right suppliers, the right vendors to work with that will support you with that journey and really understand and go through a discovery piece with you up front and your stakeholders as to what they're looking for, what the real challenges are before diving into setting up a tool that's not going to drive any impact. And so I think it comes down to this whole product thinking, and actually what the best sort of providers systems are doing they're thinking about this whole product. They're thinking about what shape and size and strategy your organization is, and if they can fit that well, And if not, they're politely saying, actually, I don't think it makes sense for us to do business. Thank you very much, but I think you'd be better off with one of these other lovely suppliers here on the call, being able to do that and find the right solutions for the right customer. So I think it comes down to, being able to have those open conversations with your suppliers, your partners, but also finding the right way to streamline that, because what happens quite often is there's always going to be some form of resistance to change. And so I touched earlier on sort of think big, start small. And I think really the best thing you can do is identify the people that are surrounding you within your organization that really share the same passion and advocacy for driving some real change and impact and being the next step for the organization in whatever scale that is, but actually focusing it around your particular niche or area within the company, working with a supplier or building something in-house yourself on a small scale to start with, and getting to a success story. And a few of us have touched today on the power of a business case. As soon as you can understand how to tie what you're looking to do with how that's ideally going to drive more revenues for the company or save costs or improve people's lives and ways of working within the organization, you'll be surprised at how quickly leadership will turn their heads and get involved in the conversation. And so the suppliers and the vendors that get involved with supporting you with those types of conversations are also the ones that you want to buddy up with and help you make that change.
Absolutely.
It's really interesting because I think that what you touched on there as well is it's that what you're talking about is one, building community around what you're trying to do, and two, messaging and positioning, which is one of the things that I think that anybody in any kind of like leadership or kind of anybody who's trying to get a team started or anybody who's in leadership should probably go and read some books on like messaging and positioning from like a communications marketing point of view, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell something to somebody internally who probably doesn't understand what you're doing, and going and just rabbiting, some book that you've read that they've never read and they probably don't understand is probably not going to help you. You need to figure out how to tailor that message to them, and be able to sell that concept into them. And I think that it's the same with, design systems as it is with DesignOps and all of these things, especially things where we're still relatively early in like these functions and these ideas. I think that's one of the things. So it's like one of the things that we first tell people when we're working with folks, when we're like onboarding with Zero Height is, we ask them do you have a communications plan? And usually they look at us really blankly, like, why would we need one of those? It's an internal tool. And it's like, well, if you don't understand who your stakeholders are, and who your users are internally, and how you need to talk to them, where you need to talk to them, and what kind of message they will respond well to, you're probably going to fail. And so, it's like first step to getting buy-in for these kind of things is just making sure you're talking in the language that folks will be, responsive to.
Yeah. Today's symposium opened up with a talk by Jose Coronado, and he was talking about, leading with compassion. And part of that is these infrastructures we put together to serve our researchers and designers to make sure that operations is smooth and that we're communicating across and up and down through our organization takes a little bit of that empathy and that compassion. Like, we should be building these tools and threading them together and making sure communications is as seamless and painless as possible, as just like good practitioners of human centricity. And so I kind of love that lean that you're taking. And listening first, what are the needs, but then also leading by some level of example, right? So if we're going to start small and like think big and start small and make those success stories, like what's a good thread that we can follow from continuous discovery to design, that's sort of our thin client or lightweight expression of that, and then build on it from there. And I'd love to, like, it hasn't been shown to me in any way, but I'd love to have someone demonstrate, well, this is how we use user testing, and this is where we thread into Airtable, and this is how we communicate over to the design system side. It'd be so cool to see like this multi-tool solution threaded infrastructure at some point expressed and then somehow demonstrated. But Yeah, I think that's where if we're taking anything from this conversation, which has to end now, I'm sorry. First, thank you everyone for showing up today and giving your perspectives. Second, don't let this be the end. Like, let's all continue to explore this together. Call each other up, link up on LinkedIn, get this conversation moving, and let's explore it in the future. And thank you all for attending.